not the least of which will be templates. And then, of course, um, some information about deep road species that not everyone actually really understands. A few people who have done some underdark work, reading some of the books and playing D&D and a few other things, have encountered some, but there are there's a vast array. The deep roads are far more expansive than is able to be handled in just a couple of books. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit too. First off, we're going to talk about some template some template stuff, just a wee bit here. So templates, as some of you know, are a superimposed set of abilities and rules placed over your original. Good example, of course, is vampires. You know, perfect example is because vampires themselves are not a race. Okay, Dhampir are because they are born and they have a uniqueness in that way. A template, on the other hand, we're looking at vampires, can be on anything. Okay, well, virtually anything, not quite anything, but a vampiric human is mostly when people think of vampires, what they're really thinking about is a template, a vampiric human. Okay, that's your traditional Dracula, Nosferatu, um, most your movies and stuff, for example, are taking the vampire template and putting it on humans. Okay, now that template does fit with others, and it does make some alterations. Elves, for example, vampiric elves, you have all of your vampire abilities, in addition to the mentality and previously full long life of an elf. So you add immortality to it, some shape shifting, neck biting, and a few other things on top of that. But the mentality is significantly different. The difference between a human becoming a vampire and the difference between an elf becoming a vampire is huge. A lot of times humans become undead so that they can extend their life. Okay? There's if it's voluntarily done, they usually do it because they have unfinished business or they fear death very human, you know. Humans don't live very long, really, in comparison to most other races. Now, a near immortal race, like elves, live 1,000 years, that is, 10 times as long as the oldest humans. they really, they have no inherent fear of death. Okay? So if they have chosen to be a vampire, they've done it for a very different reason. Okay? A very different reason. They're not doing it to try to extend their life. They're doing it for some other, generally nefarious reason. Now there are of course other ways and other reasons, but a vampiric elf has taken the undeath for a significantly different reason than, you know, any human. That, of course, is if it's done on purpose. But we can extend that. Uh, let's look at vampiric wolves. Now we're talking about the animal, not the racial types. Okay, werewolves are already undead. You cannot make a werewolf into a vampire. It's not possible. Okay, and it is generally thought that you cannot do that with the lichen types, but there are precedents. It can happen. It is possible. And lichen do not have very long lifespans either. They don't have. They're not like werewolves who are undead, and they don't have a lifespan. Lichen have a longer lifespan than a dog because they're not dogs. But they do not have a lifespan anywhere near like that of an elf. You know, somewhere akin to humans. You know, in the general ballpark. So they may choose that route for the same reasons that a human might. It is possible, of course. But the advantage, well, most beings that choose to be vampires or, you know, some of the other undead types, they choose that for the power that comes with it. Because, like all things, as you age and grow older and become more adept at what you're doing, you become more and more powerful. So, a vampire lord, for example, is far more powerful than a vampire. And it's not a different race, okay? It's just an older vampire. It's, it's like dragons, okay? There are, once you get past, it's based on age, you know, it's based on age. And that becomes increasingly significant because ancient things, beings, have had the time to get better at what they're doing. Just like, leveling up, for example. It's the same concept. They're leveling up um, just by not dying, not being destroyed. And as they get older, they get more powerful. Yes, Jalil Alilana. Dun, 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 dun. Waiting on Lark's question, and then I will answer it and move forward. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, duh. I forgot that she cannot hear. Thank you. Thank you, Lark, for typing to Lark. I do forget that we do have some people who need transcription. My apologies. Okay, so while she is working on that, uh, templates. So, okay, go ahead. Yeah, werewolf is undead. That's correct. Not a lichen. Okay, lichens are a race. All right, and there are there are many wolf types, but the but a werewolf is undead. S Someone is bitten, and then when they and generally torn apart and killed, and when they come back as a werewolf. The the way to all the other wolf types, they're not. It's not a disease or something like that. Um, Werewolfism, lycanthropy. Yes, all undead are a template. Okay, undeath is a template. Thank you, Jill Air. Yes, undeath is a template. It's not a racial type. There are racial types that mirror some of the undead types, like lichen mirrors werewolf, Dampier mirrors vampire, Githyanki mirror mummies. Okay, so there are they do exist. They're all racial types that mirror the undeath, but undeath is a template. Okay, all right. So that leads directly into another template that is not always a template. Actually, this one's the most confusing of them all. So I'm going to tackle this one next. Draconic. Okay. Now, dragons are a race. Okay. They are not a template. Okay, but there are there is a draconic template, but unlike undead, it's not something that is what's the best way to put it? Something you come back as. Yeah, that's right. Undead, you come back as an undead. When you die, you come back as an undead. There is a draconic template, and but a it is more utilized to as a definition, for example, and it helps to understand a certain type of being. Um, Kirin, for example, does anyone know what a Kirin is? Okay, a Kirin is basically a draconic horse. Okay, it's a dragon horse. All right, and yes, it is Chinese, and it's draconic is used to just to help define what it is. Not that it's not that you a horse can come back as a Kirin. You know, a dragon doesn't kill a horse and then it comes back as a Kirin. It's not the same way. Okay, it's used as a defining feature. Okay, does anyone know what a dragoon is? Aside from the dark elf commander types. Yes, Star is a dragoon. That is that is the title for a dark elf commander. Correct, captain. Okay, yes, but there is also a beastie. There is also a beastie called a dragoon, or sometimes pronounced dragon. All right, but does you know depends on who's writing it. But it is a lion, a draconic lion. Okay, it looks just like a lion, but it's covered in typically brass scales and has wings and is all draconic. All right. Yes, of course. You know, because of the uh, dark elven captain rank, I usually pronounce it dragon as you know, just to for make it easier. Okay, but it is commonly pronounced dragoon, which actually helps with dark elves with the dark elven captain rank because those who have encountered a dragon know that it's deadly. You know, it's not very common, so not very many people will have encountered one. But those that have understand why the dark elven rank is the way it is. Okay, if you cross a dragon and a lion, it makes a very vicious combination. So it's it uses the draconic template, but is its own species? Same with Kieran. Actually, all of the draconic templates typically are uh, imposed upon uh, a racial type, a creature type, to help define that. You know, another good example, Hydra. Everyone's familiar with a hydra, right? Well, there is the pyrohydra and the cryohydra are draconic hydras. Now you're thinking, well, isn't a hydra already kind of a lizard? Yes, it is, but it doesn't have a breath weapon, okay, and it doesn't have wings, okay. A pyrohydra is a basically a fire-breathing hydra with wings, vicious as all get out. Cryohydra is a ice-breathing hydra with wings, okay. Is anyone familiar with Godzilla? Go, go, Godzilla. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure you are. Okay, well, the villain, one of maybe the arch villain for Godzilla, is Ghidra, or sometimes pronounced Ghidorah. All right? Ghidra is a pyrohydra. Okay? Now, sometimes they don't make it so his heads can grow back like a hydra's, but sometimes they do. It depends on what the writer is for that particular movie or episode. But at least it gives you a visual. Ghidra is a pyrohydra, okay? And that is a draconic template placed upon a hydra, okay? Now you may be wondering, okay, um, can, does that expand? And actually it does, yes. But in the case of the draconic hydra, it generally falls into an existing racial type. Now, just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I have just a wee bit of knowledge about races that you probably have never even dreamt of. And if you have, they're probably in your nightmares. But Draconic is fits in there quite well. In fact, after a fashion, you could say that some of the deep road species have a draconic template. Okay, after a fashion, some of them do. The Cantor, for example. Now, has anyone in this room seen XJ9 and knows about his Cantor? Cantor is a rabbit. It's a little XJ9. He's a Metallicite that is defected to our side. He's in the Rangers. That's correct. XJ9. That's short. It's short for his full name. I think it's XJ9721. I think because they have numbers, not names. He's still around. Trust me on that one. I will poke and prod him to appear in the near future. But anyway, yes, he has a Cantor. Yes, the Metallicite Ranger. That's correct. Yes. Anyway, reason I brought him up is because he has a Cantor. A Cantor is a deep roads rabbit. All right. Now you may say, well, there's a rabbit. There's a rabbit in the deep roads. Yes, but that little rabbit, is pretty darn vicious. It's uh, it's armored. Now, yes, of course, it has soft fur and everything, but that's outside of its armor. It has um, it has teeth like a cobra. It has teeth like a cobra, and it is poisonous. First off, yes, if it bites you, it will you know inject cobra cobra venom akin to cobra venom. But also, if you eat one of them, you will most likely expire because they're very poisonous. It's like a poison arrow frog. Okay, they those are called cantors, and they are bunnies. They're rabbits that run around in the deep roads. It's basically um, a draconic template pressed pressed over a rabbit. Okay. Now they don't have wings, but not all dragons have wings, do they? They don't breathe fire. They have venom. Not all dragons breathe fire, do they? No. Okay. Typically, but not all. Anyway, actually, that feeds right into to the deep roads. But I will. There are a lot of templates to go over. Yes, Manicula. That's highly amusing. My youngest son's favorite book but is Banicula. Um, but yes, certainly, Cantor is cute and mean. Vorpal Bunny is a good word for him. Okay, but there are a vast array. Actually, yeah, I'm going to continue to talk about them. Every once in a while, I will bring up some deep roots as because that's part of it anyway. Um, in this very room, Jill Rose has a deep roads creature. I don't know if she actually has it visible. Has a But she does. She has a Zorn. Okay. Now a Zorn, a Zorn is a um, relatively small beastie, like a spelled with an X, but yes. Um, Basically looks kind of like a badger. Okay. It looks like a badger with spikes on its back. Okay. And it can smell metal and it can smell gemstones. Okay. And digs through the ground as easy as swimming. Okay. It's and Zorn is another deep roads creature. They have, like I said, they look like uh, they look like badgers. So they have very big claws, and they can you know they can tear up most entities 10 times their size. Okay, they're very tough. They're armored. Those spikes that are covering down their back are very, very, very tough. They can crawl through granite like it's water, and they can roll up into a ball, and then they're like a spiked ball. um, you're all familiar with Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Well, imagine Sonic the Hedgehog with an attitude, and take away the anthropomorphic too. If Sonic the Hedgehog was an animal instead of anthropomorphized cartoon character, you know, then that helps you too because a Zoran can roll up when they can roll up into a ball like an armadillo. Okay, but it's a spiked armadillo. You know. Anyway, another deep rose creature, and after a fashion, one could say, arguably, that it is a hedgehog with a draconic template placed over. All right, so that's a couple of templates right there. Another common template is demonic, okay, and devilish, celestial. Now, yes, all three of those have their own races, right? Yes, they do. But if a there are what's the best way to put it? Um, there are animals that live elsewhere in other planes of existence. You know, weirs is another goes right into what I'm talking right now. They are a weird is an elemental template put over a creature. Conic, same. You can do the same thing with. Demonic, same thing. All right. Demonic fish.
Mic off.
Okay. You may think, all right, demonic fish. What's that? Well, chances are, if you've got a very large, intelligent piranha that um, is pretty tough, has got a lot of hit points, and maybe even swims through the air instead of the water. Well, there you just placed a draconic template over a fish. Devilish, similar, same concept. You know, you've got a turtle. You know, now you put a devilish template over him, and now he's a black turtle with red spiky shell and flies in a circle like a UFO, and fire comes out. Gamera, like Gamera from Godzilla. Um, Gamera's a good guy, but you know, you, one could argue that you use a devilish template. They built Gamera when they designed Gamera. Yes, I like Gamera. Gamera's cool. He was my favorite one of all the of that era. But um, so that brings up weirds. Now, weirds are the general name for all elemental beasties. Okay, and so anytime you come across an elemental beastie, it is a weird. Okay, and weirds obviously have different levels. You know, whether it's a fire weird mouse or a stone weird elephant. Okay, There's obviously going to be some power level differences there, but there's some consistency. Something else. Weirds are as immortal as elementals. Okay? If they die, they go back home. Now, in the case of demonic or or devilish templates, sometimes those are possessions. Okay? If a being is possessed, they may take on a demonic template or a devilish template, in which case they are not immortal. But if we're talking about an animal from the abyss or from one of the hells, then you can add a template onto it and it does become immortal because unless you kill it on its home plane, that's a horse of a different color, pink with purple polka dot. But yeah, um, weirds are perfect examples. Okay, so that gives you some general ideas of where how templates are utilized and used. So let's talk about hex. Let's talk about hex, baby. I cracked myself up when I came up with that. I was walking across the street, and and so I came back, and I had to, I just had to say, all right, we're gonna have a class. We're talk about hex. All right. So the hex template. Hex template is you have a wizard has hexed an individual, and it's it's a curse after a fashion. All right, but think about a hex is that it is a what's the best way to put it? It's a visual. Okay, if someone is hexed, then it, it's not like they're controlled by someone. Okay, it's not like a G's. A G'd individual is is someone who has a spell cast on them to make to force them to do something. A hex, on the other hand, um, has a particular set of parameters. A good example, let's say, got a dog that is hexed. All right, someone has hexed his guard dog. Well, that guard dog now has a certain set of parameters that are placed on them. Maybe maybe the parameters are anytime that uh, someone walks through this door, um, you will grow 4 times your size, turn red, and breathe fire, and then eat them. Okay. Now, obviously, you're gonna have to have those other spells to be able to cast in too. But the hex is a carrier wave. Okay. The hex is what makes it so that all those other spells that you're putting on them stay. Okay. And the hex is very, very long lasting. Okay. Can it be broken? Yes. But a hex is very long lasting, depending upon the level of the creator. Okay. Let's say um, best a good thing, a good way to put it is use use the um, shoot the time periods that we use for wards. Use that on hexes, okay? But hexes are done on people or living beings. Words are not done on people, okay? Words are done on things, okay? A hex is done on a living being, right? But they have a parameter. Yes. Use the word timeline because they're very long lasting. Hexes last a really long time. But yes, they can be broken. Um, just like words can be broken. Just not it's not necessarily easy, but it can be done, right? But basically when you it's 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 like a curse, okay? Except is temporary. A curse after the wording goes off, the curse is over, okay? If uh you curse, I got a cursed sword, all right? Now, the curse on that sword is that anyone who picks that up starts aging until they turn into dust. Right? Well, that curse ends when the curse is over. Okay? A hex isn't is different in the fact that if you put a hex on that sword and say this person starts aging until they turn to dust. Now, all right. Well, you don't put a hex on a sword. You put a hex on a person. You put a hex on that person and make them age. Right? Well, it's not really designed to do that. Okay? A hex isn't really designed to kill someone. Okay? You don't set up hexes to kill people, whereas curses. A hex is a basically a long running joke. Okay? All right. Um, it's not, a hex is not fatal typically. Now you can set it up where where a hex can cause fatality, you know, but it isn't itself a it isn't itself fatal. It doesn't. A good example of a fatal hex might be you are hexed so that when you uh, fight X type of beings, you will uh, grow scales and a tail and fangs. All right. All right. Now you just made that person. Whenever they fight, let's say that you put a hex on an elf, which are magical and be hard to do, but say you did it, and you put a hex on an elf so that when if they every time they fight against another elf, they suddenly become a lizard man. Okay? That is a typical hex. That's a typical kind of hex that would be a good choice, and it would probably get yourself killed. Get that person killed because they now they're a lizard man. All right, and that when they go in to fight whoever what because the hex was set up when you fight an elf, the elf may be like Hey, you're a lizard man. What are you doing at my house, man? Get out of here. And they're not going to be listening the same way they would talking to another. You could also set up a hex where someone can't talk went to a certain uh, racial type or something like that. And you let's go back to the elf. Instead of hexing him, turning him to a lizard man, you hex him so that he can't talk. So every time he comes up to another elf, he suddenly stops being able to talk. Instead of actually being able to talk. That's a hex also. Okay? Could be a terrible hex too. um, or here's a fatality text hex. When you are killed, you explode. That's if someone kills you, you explode. That's a hex. All right, and that would be one of the few fatality fatality hexes. Okay, but you notice, and when you when you set up a hex, it has to have a precursor. Okay, it has to have a when this thing happens, that thing happens. Just like a ward. Wards, they're sitting there, they're doing their own thing, they're not doing anything. But some thief comes up and tries to go in there, suddenly the ward activates. Bam. Okay? And starts doing its thing, right? Okay? Um, sepia snake sigil, my favorite ward. Right? By itself, it's not doing nothing, right? Then you walk into my office and open one of my books that I have worded, ones that have worded on sepia snake sigil, and suddenly you're encased in amber. Okay, it wasn't doing anything, right? Until it got triggered. Hex is like that. It has a trigger. It has to have a trigger. It's not just that something that happens all the time. Okay, it has to have a trigger. Now, can that trigger be larger scale? Yeah, it can be, but it's you know hexes are very situational. Does all that make sense? I know it's when you're talking about hexes, it can get very confusing. It's, well, what can you do with it? What can't you do with it? What what you can do with it is it's a carrier wave for all the other spells that you want to put in, and it has to have a trigger. That's what you can do with it. What can't you do with it? Um, you can't just kill people outright. Hex is not designed to to kill people. It's designed. It's a. I like the permanent joke analogy. Okay, because it causes something. Okay, that doesn't go away for a really long time because it uses the word timeline. Hexes are a hexes are a mage thing. Okay, but there are um, there are priest hexes. Okay, mages, witches, clerics, druids, shaman. So all the caster types, even bards, can do a hex. But just remember that um, hexes are level based. Hexes are level based. Okay, and you you can gain the ability. You cannot. No one can get a hex and get the ability to cast hex until your third level. Okay, all right. But at at third level, a mage can set up a hex, uh, set up a third level hex. A priest can set up a second level hex. A bard can set up a first level hex. Okay, so arcane hexes are third level, but all of them you get at third level. Okay, you cannot get hex until you're third, but arcane hexes are cast at third level. Divine hexes are cast at second level. Bards that use hex, they cast them at first level. Yeah, yeah, that's the best way to put it. If you're third, obviously, a fourth level bard would do a second level hex. Fifth level bard would do a third level hex. Right? Does that make sense? Yes, Zilla Rose, that's correct. Any questions? I know the hexes have the most. They have a lot of open. Uh, it's very open ended. There's a lot of potential confusion. Hexes. So here's your chance to throw out some questions. Most significant thing, hexes are on people. Yes, there are. Yes, you can do positive hexes. That's right. Hexes are not always bad. Okay. You can do a hex that says, all right, whenever you go talk to Billy Bob, suddenly your charisma level goes up three. um, that's I know we don't use charisma points, but you get me. You know, it gives you the idea what I'm saying. You know. All right, thank you. Breaking hexes. Thank you for that up. Now, to break a hex, you have to have a caster of the same level that at, of at least that same level to break them. Okay? A example, a first level mage is not going to be able to break a third level mage's hex. You have to have a third level mage to do it. And yes, correct. But the rule of three is in effect. You can't. The rule. Rule of three is in effect across most things, and it does apply to hexes. Okay? But generally speaking, you need to have, with the, with the exception of the rule of three, but that's not just one person. For those of you that don't know what the rule of three is, there you go. He just explained it for you. That's good. Rule of three is that three casters at the level below can equal that. Okay, and that so it is something to remember. Rule three is a good one. So otherwise, you know, if you want to break a third level hex, you need a third level mage. If it's a divine hex, you need a third level priest. Okay, and they have to be. And here's the clincher there that you need someone of the same type of hex. So if it's a divine hex, you need a divine caster. If it's an arcane hex, you need an arcane caster. Yes, that is correct. Just like, yep, that's right. Dillo Rose, put out your numbers. That is accurate. Okay. Breaking hexes is similar to breaking wards in that way, in almost every way. You know, wards are not something you cast on a person or on a thing. That's right. Arcane casters cannot break divine hexes, and divine casters cannot break divine hexes. Okay? It's like pouring water and oil, pouring oil and water, depending on which one you are. Okay? You need the same. You need water on water or oil on oil. Break it. Yes, Sage can break both. Sage is both. Yes, absolutely. And Sage is a paragon, so there's almost no, you know, going to be not many hexes that are above a Sage's level. Pretty much you'd have to be Magister, Magus, or Supervillain, or myself. Okay. But there you have it. Can you bypass hexes? Well, hexes are on a person, okay? They're not a thing that you can go around. So, no, not really. You cannot. It's uh, it's something in a person. The only way you could bypass it is dissecting them, and then why did you want to? How does that help you? um, yeah, no. Generally speaking, generally speaking, I'm going to say no on that. But there may be some exceptions to the rule. Okay, it could if I'm going to say that's subjective. It's going to depend on the wording of the person who cast the hex, because there may be some hexes that you could bypass in some way. Can't think of anything off the top of my head, but Um, is it impossible? No, but since it's cast on a person, not on a thing, I can't really see a way to bypass it off the top of my head. Although, do remember also, okay? Do remember that hexes can, a hexed individual can be trapped like a demon, okay? Here's the clincher about he- people that are hexed, they can be trapped by salt, okay? So if you're saying can they be bypassed, well, salt it doesn't change. It doesn't really bypass the hex, but someone who is hexed can be trapped by salt. And there are also some other types of uh, um, traps, pentagrams, and other types of demon traps that you can use, and that would also trap a hex individual. No. Okay, hold on. Uh, I'm trying to figure out what Lark's question is. To break an arcane hex, you need an arcane caster. To break a divine hex, you need a divine caster. Hopefully, a sage can break both kinds of hexes because they are both. Okay. But anyway, yes. Um, so all of the different types of those work on hexes, on hexed individuals too. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Yes, that is correct, Jilla Rose. If you created a sage hex, they would have to have both. They two people or another sage of your level to break it. That's the thing. Yeah, that's sage specific. That is how sages work. They blend their magic. Unlike um, two people working together. Two people are working together. It's going to be layered. Okay. Um, like a tiramisu. All right. However, a sage is more like a chocolate cake. You know, they put everything together and mix it and come up with something new, not like a tiramisu. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah. Put a sage and a thaumaturge together. You're gonna have some uh, pretty hardcore. Now, any other questions about hexes? All right. While people are thinking about um, hexes, I'm going to throw out a couple of other deep road species that people don't really think of. And um, at the end of AER the other day, we talked about hook horrors. Okay. Um, Anamakin are, is their actual name, but you look them up in a D&D book, or you look or you're looking for the common word. They are called hook horrors, but Anamakin is the Dak Alfar word for them, and they are basically um, corvid, not even people. They're basic. They're basically man-sized corvids that do not fly at the at the ends of their long, what would have been wings. They have massive scythe-like hooks. Very intelligent, and they are quite um, intelligent, vicious beasties. If you could think of, if you can imagine a crow without feathers, and or without feathered wings, yeah, because they basically they don't really have feathers. They're kind of armored almost. Not quite chitin covered, but resembling such. But at the end of their long, what would have been wings, they have these scythe-like hooks. Does that describe them very well? And of course, they're black, and they are a deep roads beastie, so it's really dark and very hard to see them. Sneaky, smart, evil, rotten, and they eat carrion. Anamakan, hook horrors. That is slick. That is a really, really good use of a hex. Wow, that's slick. I like it. Yeah, a sage hex you would have to have both in order to do it. All right, let's see this link that you pulled up, Dina. Uh, that is more of a. I mean, technically, yes, that's an Anamakan, but it's a really ugly one. And that one looks more like a insect than uh, than. But hey, Is it wrong? No. It's just one that's really, really ugly. And Animaka are really insects. You know, they are corvids. You know, but you get the idea. Okay. So, do we have Larks? That's okay. You can ask your questions. Just making sure that you got it. Okay. You can ask. Not a problem, and I will handle it. Hopefully, you understand. Do you need me to type it up for you? Okay. Okay. Hopefully that is all squared away. Okay. Any other questions about hexes? So let me throw out um, some more Deep Roads beasties. Okay, let me answer that one first. Uh, Bards, actually, bards. That's the thing about bards is they can weave either kind because they have a little bit of druid in them and a little bit of mage. They don't. They're not like a sage in the fact that they are uh, one and the same, but they can weave. Yes, they can weave either kind. They cannot blend them, but they can weave both kinds. Hence, that's why they weave two levels below everyone else because jack of all trades, master of none. Yes, bards can choose between either. Yes, bards are two levels below everyone else when it comes to casting. And GA levels, again, a at no one can cast hexes until your third level. At third level, mages can cast third level hexes. Priests can cast second level hexes. Bards can cast first level hexes. Does that make sense? You may ask, why do why are divine hexes cast one below mage? Well, because divine hexes are come from somewhere else. Okay, they have to have um, divine divine intervention, and um, it's channeled differently. Okay, how? Okay, the easiest way to define the level of hexes is think about this. How is how? What are you trying to do? Okay, if you're trying to make it so that um, you hex someone's foot so that every time they walk it squeaks like a squeaky dog toy, then that's you can pull that one off with a first level hex. Okay, all right, but if your hexes to um, turn them into a lizard man every time they get into a fight, that's going to be a third level hex. So hexes are so broad that you can't put you can't put them in a box. Okay, it's going to be very subjective. And remember, the key element about a hex is a channel, is a channel that you've opened up to them. So, what spells are you using? Okay, if you're using first level spells in that hex, it's probably a first level hex. If you're using third level spells in that hex, it's definitely a third level hex. Okay? And also, the more spells you put into the hex, the higher level of hex it has to be in order to do it. Does that make sense? I know that's the reason I'm having people ask questions because I know hexes. You're doing good. Hexes. There's a lot of uh, area for confusion. A lot of room to trip up when it when you're working on hexes. Okay, but some things to keep in mind is that hexes are not generally fatal, but they can be. But remember that if you do a fatal hex, obviously that's a pretty high level, and the number of spells you put into a hex defines the level of the hex. So let's say, remember earlier I was talking about if you are killed, you blow up. All right. Well, obviously means that when that person was in that hex is a fireball. Okay? Well, Fireball's not a first level spell, is it? So you think that's a first level hex? Anyone have any rough idea what level they think Fireball is? It's third. Fireball is a third level spell. Yes. Yeah, there is a flaming sphere that is second level. Okay. Flaming sphere is second level. And there's a miniature fireball. It's called Firebolt. That's first level. No. That hurling a fireball, that is a third level spell. And it is evocation. So, if you were to put a hex on someone so that they exploded when they die, what you have done is you have hexed them with fireball. Okay? So that when they die, they blow up. Okay? Now that's very atypical. That's, you know, um, death hexes are very atypical, but well, it's a possibility, so it can be discussed, right? But anyway, that means if that's the only thing put in them, that's a third level hex minimum. If there's anything else that goes with it, that ups that's gonna up it, make it a high, up the hex, so it goes up, so it goes above that. Does that make sense? But key element here is a hex is a conduit. It's it sets up the parameters for your other things to go into it. The hex by itself doesn't do anything. You know, that's like picking up a glass bottle. All right, cool. You got a glass bottle. It's awesome. May even be shaped cool, or you know, shine really cool in the light. That's awesome. But it's empty. It's got nothing in it. Okay, those other things are what makes the spell, the hex effective. Make it do something. The hex by itself is the conduit. Okay. Is is that helping? Everyone getting a grasp of what hexes really are. All right. And like I said before, a hex individual can't cross salt. Okay? And there are a few other traps as well that you demonologists know all about. any questions about any of the things that we have discussed so far? Alrighty. I know we've only talked about a few deep rose creatures, the Animakin, the Cantor, Zorn, lots and lots and lots of other ones. Um, some of you are probably familiar with which is a um, charcoal gray ox that is a deep roots beastie also. It's like a very large yak. Okay, and some of you may be thinking, hey, you know what? The creatures you're talking about, they don't seem like they live underground. All right, here's something that most people don't understand. There's a lot more to underground than actually is. Now, as are there owls? Is that your question? Mm, there are three owls that are down there. Okay, there are three owls that are in the Underdark and the Deep Roads and the Old Kingdoms. Okay. Ah, yes, you have the figurine of wondrous power. Uh, that's cool. Is the very very least you have an immortal metal bird. But all right, uh, yes, the here's some more. There are three beasts of burden, three lizards that are commonly ridden in the deep roads. Um, the Drathir, the Drakur, and the Dracosa. All right. The first one is a two-legged lizard that is used for striding. Okay, and moving quickly. The second one is four-legged and is you know is a decent mount and is the common mount type. And then the third one is a beast of burden. It's four-legged also and is more like an elephant. Okay, as far as size and stature and amount it can carry. Um, that's just three more of them. And there are a variety, so many beasties that inhabit the deep roads that people don't even think about because, but it's a huge world. All right, there are caverns in the deep roads that are large enough they actually have their own weather. Okay, have any of you ever been in a building large enough to produce its own weather? Okay, yes, they do exist. There's one down the street from me. It's so big that it rains inside. Okay? It produces its own weather. Okay? So think about that. That's right. Exactly. A dirigible hanger is big enough and it does that. Actually, the one down the street is a dirigible hanger. How about that? But when we're talking about the deep roads, think along those lines. Don't narrow your mind to think all in the terms of oh, man-sized caves or places you have to crawl. Okay, the deep roads are huge. There are vast oceans in the deep roads, and then the caves can be so big above it that you wouldn't know the difference between floating on the ocean at night or floating on in a deep roads ocean at all. Vast oceans. Okay, so just because the beasties are darker and generally more man-eating doesn't mean they're not there. Okay, and there are types of fungus that give out ultraviolet light that allow other types of plants to grow. Okay, so for those of you that can see in the UV spectrum, how many dark elves do I have in this room? I see. Yeah, Mer speaking C and UV. Um, so that's a good example. For those of you that can see in the UV spectrum, there are there are mushrooms that would glow like the sun in your UV eyes. You know, butterflies, and that means you pixie types see have the ability to see UV. Okay, pixies see in UV. Okay, so do trolls. But there's no trolls in the room right now. but and so to some dark elves see UV. Okay, it is not at all uncommon for dark elves to see in the ultraviolet spectrum. It is their natural way for them to see. Okay, just like regular elves see in the infravision, they see in the infrared spectrum. Dark elves, by their nature, see in the ultraviolet spectrum. But yes, they can have infravision or dark vision. Dark elves are designed to live in a place with no light. But that is very subjective because if you have mushrooms that give out UV light, does that mean you have light? Anyone? Doom, 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 doom. Yes, it does. It just means you don't have light in the regular spectrum. No, that means that you can see just perfectly. It just means that they give out light that's not in the typical spectrum. So a human would be looking at a black room. Yes, you can see perfectly in the underdark. If you can see if you have ultra vision, you can see perfectly in the in the underdark because there are mushrooms that give out UV light. Okay? It makes it so it's never dark. Okay? But that's only to people that can see in ultraviolet. Okay? And there are a lot of mushrooms that do that. Has here's anyone played Skyrim here? Doom, doom, doom. Okay. So in Skyrim, there are sometimes you go down and you find the Falmer, right? And the Falmer in Skyrim are snow elves. Now, actually, they have a version. Okay, those are deep elves. Okay, what we call deep elves. But anyway, point being, when you go down in those areas that Falmer, you see those glowing mushrooms on the walls. Okay, all those lichen that are growing on the walls there. Those are UV mushrooms. Okay, and as one can might imagine, they're all over the place in the deep roads. They're all over the place in the Old Kingdom. They're all over the place in the Underdark. Okay? And one may ask why that might be. Yes, you can see in the deep roads. Why might that be? Many, many, many reasons. Number one, and not the least of which, is that dark elves are going to make sure it happens. You know, they they want they want to have light without actually having to throw out. Now, it's not that they don't have the ability, and commonly they do set up lampposts with UV light in them. It's not uncommon. It's very, but because there's so much destruction has been done, a lot of those lampposts will have been destroyed. You know, but it's not quite the same when you're talking about mushrooms. They just grow. Okay, and if you get a spore on something alive that goes down that's running down the hallway, that spore triggers another, you know, triggers something else on another wall, and then you got some more. So you got UV light everywhere. Okay, because there are a vast array of UV emitting mushrooms, fungus. Okay, and they make it so that you can see. If you can see UV, like butterflies, trolls, pixies, dark elves, myrrh. All right. Does anyone know why myrrh have uh, can see UV? Wild guess. Because they live at the bottom of the ocean. All right. That's right. And so if you live at the bottom of the ocean, you need to be able to see, right? Yeah, you do. So they have developed ultravision, UV, because at the bottom of the ocean there are a lot of plants and animals. Yeah, actually, myrrh have are extremely tough because they can go down a couple of miles, much deeper pressures. All right, good question. As far as the half breeds, there is a chance they have acquired that from their parent. Okay? It doesn't always happen, okay? But there's a chance it could have. If I was designing my character as a half, if I was making a half breed, I would definitely make sure that I at least got that uh, vision from my parent. Okay. Now, typically, it's going to be 30 foot instead of 60 foot, using D&D terms, quote unquote. Um, but yeah, hey, it's better than not, right? Or 45 as opposed to 90, you know, 60 as opposed to 120, depending on that's the way elves are. And Mer are going to be the same way. Pixies are tiny, so they're 30 and 60 for a half pixie. Of course, you got a half pixie. That's some really weird parentage. I'm sure that was. Hopefully, it was some very very magical communing at that point. Otherwise, it'd be really weird. Yeah, very magical moment. Otherwise, I think there are fetishes that go with that. I'm not sure. All right, but anyway, yes, there you go. That's what that's what to give you a half pixie there. D-lysergic acid. Okay, so does that answer your question? All right, cool. But yes, long story short, if you have ultra ultravision, if you can see in the UV light spectrum, you can see in the underdark, just as like a human would see in in a normal situation, walking around outside. Okay, as if you have light sources all over the place instead of a sun running over your head, unless you're in any of the cities that still have a functional sun. Something that most people don't realize is that dark elves created artificial suns that rise and fall like the sun does uh, for their cities. All of their big cities have a sun that is an artificial sun for every single city. Okay, you got this massive cavern that the city is built in, big enough that it has its own weather pattern. It's gigantic. It would, you know, um, if you could think of a cavern big enough to put LA into or New York, all right, that's about the size of some of the some of the um, largest cities that the dark elves make. All right, and each one of those has an artificial sun. Okay, and if you have an artificial sun, obviously you not only are you going to have mushrooms everywhere, but you're also going to have a light source that rises and falls and creates days and nights. Okay, and that light source primarily gives out light, UV light because that's what dark elves use. Okay, so sometimes you know you have let's say a human. Let's say a human somehow walks into a giant dark elf city. It may be pitch black, dark as sin, right? Okay, but it isn't. Okay, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Now let's say an elf walks in there. Well, elves have infravision, right? They don't have ultravision. Okay, but that means the elf is going to see every single living being in the city as a silhouette of light, and they're going to see all their footsteps. Okay, walking around, every step that someone makes leaves behind a heat trail, so that elf's going to see every single one of them. All right, they're going to see that ultraviolet sun because that ultraviolet sun also is going to emit infrared rays because not all dark elves are UV. Yes, that's the nature and that's the norm, but when you're building a sun, you need to make sure it covers all your entire populace, not just not just a certain part. But it's not going. But that sun is not going to emit any regular. It's not going to emit standard light. Okay, it's going to emit UV and IR because that is what dark elves function on. And trolls. Trolls are the number one um, muscle for dark elves. In case you didn't know that, you know they are the mindless brutes, as they say, even though they're not all mindless. Okay, but they are the muscle that run around in the cities. Okay, and this perfect example. Okay, so all of that is part. All of that is part of the deep roads. Now, see, the deep roads are what's left after the destruction of the old kingdom. So most of those big cities are destroyed. Okay, 90% of the old empire is destroyed, but some things still survive. Okay, is it possible to find one of the one of the old sons? Yes, be pretty darn big, but is it possible to find a an old uh, destroyed New York City in the deep roads and find the sun that had been built? Yeah, it's it's possible. Hey, even finding that city would be pretty rough, and it's going to be completely inhabited by all kinds of bads. You know, every bad that can find it is going to be there. But major adventure, major adventure could occur there. And that's what all the deep roads are about, you know, is exploring this ancient empire that was destroyed by the Illithid and their minions. All right, which brings up more denizens of the deep roads, Air, the Illithid. Does anyone in this room not know what an Illithid is? I didn't think so. I figured everyone knows what an Illithid is. Oh, here we go. An Illithid. All right. Illithid is a squid head. You know, um, you know what a mind flayer is? Probably don't if you don't. But an illithid is basically, all right, Beldos Virtanen still arose, been dust for now. Okay, imagine a humanoid, okay? But instead of a head, they have a squid, okay, or an octopus, okay. All right, and that octopus it feeds by chomping on people's heads, okay. All right, and it is extremely magical and very psychic, okay, and they can't they cannot stand um, infrared light, okay. They they can handle UV, but they can't stand infrared. They do not like the regular spectrum of light. Okay. Usually they're cloaked and all that jazz. Now, okay, here we go. Elephant just walked into the room. Have a look here. This is an elephant. These are the beasties. These are the arch enemies of Dark Elfar, of the Dark Elves. Okay? These are the beasties that are responsible for 90% of the old empire having been destroyed. Very magical, very powerful, very psychic, and they can mind control. Okay? That is one of their most vicious abilities. They can mind control people so that they um, turn on each other. Okay? Now, Dark Elves are mostly mind control resistant. So, because of that, they came up with the Metallici, which are living steel golems built by mind controlled Dugar, which are deep dwarves, and Sverfneblin, which are deep gnomes. Mind controlled these two races. The Illithian mind controlled these two races, and they created the Metallici. Metallici are immortal stormtroopers that are born and bred to kill. They're raised in an environment that is all about death and destruction. And because they're golems, they don't die. They don't age. You know, they're living steel, so they're born and they grow, but they don't die. There's no old age for Metallica. Okay, they're living golems. They are powered by the souls of stolen stolen souls from individuals, and they are meant to kill. Again, people who play Skyrim have. Oh no, this is not Skyrim thing. This one is what's the name of that game? Dragon Age. Has anyone played Dragon Age? All right. In Dragon Age, have you met the golems in Dragon Age? They are dwarven constructions that that function on souls, that live on souls. That is extremely like ours. Okay, and for those of you who like Skyrim, have you met the dwarven constructs, the centurions? those are Metallica. Now, in recent years, because of the Great Alliance and all of you people out here helping fight, the some Metallica have broken away from the rest, and they have started building their own bodies, and so look as they don't all look like Dragon Age golems or Skyrim centurions. Okay, they don't all look like that anymore, but the idea is still there. I mean, this is a 200,000-year-old race. Okay, most of whom are have been born and bred to kill. Uh, Bred to kill, not to care, just as they say. Victims here, raining death. All right, so you get the point. And ironically, that was Metallica. Metallica from Metallica. Ha 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 ha. Love it. Anyway, so um, those are two of the other beasties that you may run across in the deep roads. But in addition to the standard types, like that are deep roads only, like Cantor and Anumaken, you're is also distinct, and Kuatoa, another deep roads. And for all of you that have played with Greenhaven a lot, I'm sure you've seen many Kuatoa. Kuatoa are a deep roads beastie. They are not native to up here, above world, at all. They are piranha people, and they live in the deep roads oceans. And any of you play World of Warcraft or have? All right. So Kuatoa are not uncommon in World of Warcraft at all. Okay. Um, they have different name. They're called, but they're still Kuatoa. I think they call them Murlocs. Yes, pretty sure. And oh yes, you could have. Yep, there you go. There's some Kuatoa for you right there. That's a good one. Yep. But those are, yeah, it could be. They're, vampire's a template, right? And so is zombie. All of the undead are a template. It could distinctly be possible that it is vampire Kutoa. Okay? Undead are a template, which we discussed at the beginning of class today. Um, Actually, I don't have my camera on, but I have my son gave me I have a stuffed Murloc somewhere that is, I think it's white, but it's cool. They can, baby Murlocs are cute. Ha 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 ha. If you, That is an awesome Illithid. Hey, that's right. Illithid are in World of Warcraft now too. World of Warcraft has added Illithid, and so has EverQuest. EverQuest has Illithid in it too. Um, I'm not sure if I have not seen it in Skyrim yet, but don't doesn't mean it can't happen because they're chthonic. Does anyone know what chthonic means? Hip, Obrinth. All right, Obrinth. It's not. Yes, those are very well done. That's right. Obrinth, for those of you who are unfamiliar, are the demon type that existed before Tanari. Tanari are the demons that we're used to, like succubus and incubus. Those they're Tanari. Okay, Obrinth are the demons prior to the Tanari. Okay, they're the old ones, and they're the ones that Loth or Loth made a deal with and made all us dark elves. The reason we have black skin and white hair is because Loth made a deal with the leader of the Obrinth. But anyway, that's another different story. But it is still Deep Roads related. But Obrinth, could they be in the Deep Roads? Oh yeah, they sure could be. Um, there are, I mean, any of the chthonic beings, any of the chaos species, Aboleth, Beholder. Um, anyone know what a cloaker is? A cloaker is a baby illithid, and they look like the hood of a cloak. They look like an executioner's hood with tentacles, and they crawl around on the tops on the ceiling of the on the deep roads. They don't walk on the floor. They crawl around on the ceiling, you know, because they're all creepy, right? And then they and how a new illithid is born is that baby that cloaker, that executioner's hood drops down on top of somebody's head and eats it. It eats their head, eats their brain, and takes over their body, and then they become a squid head. That's how a new yes. It's not nice. That's how that's how illithid are born. I have, I think I have one on my desk. I think if you, I'm pretty sure I still have one on my desk. If anybody ever wants to swing by and have a look at it, you're more than welcome to do so. They're sometimes called cloakers, sometimes called executioners' hoods, but they are baby illithid. I call them pre-illithid. I don't, I don't call them executioners' hoods. I don't call them cloakers. I call them pre-illithid because that's what they are. They're not really babies. They're too creepy to be babies. They're just they are. Well, an illithid is before it has a body. Oh yes, Ariella, for those of you that do not know, uses uh, a device that is that has turned a pre-illithid into a magic 8 ball. So if you guys have magic 8 ball questions, you can go talk to Ariella. She didn't hear that horrific story I just told about how an illithid is created. So some would be so very kind as to um, type that over to her. That'd be good because that's not something that you want to miss. Especially, she's a blood knight, so she definitely know how illithid are born. Okay, but yes, not a nice origin. They're not good guys. Let's see. Um, but any of the chthonic types could be down there. Beholders, Grell, um, displacer beasts. Any of you are familiar with displacer beasts? Ah, okay. I'm sure the two of you will get that rolling. But it will be an awesome role play, you know, and that is a lot of potential cool factor there. Displacer beast. Yes. And Displacer beast is like a oversized Black Panther with tentacles that jet out of its shoulders, and it is never in the same place. So if you see one, you're looking. Even though there's only one there, you see three or five. Okay, because they distort light. They distort um, the way the way light is goes through them, and so they're the reason they're commonly referred to as displacer beasts because they are displaced. You know, when you're looking at one, there's only one in front of you, but you see five. You know, mirror images of each other. Okay, and on top of that, they have tentacles, and they're vicious, and they can tear you apart. So if you see five of them, you don't know which one to fight. It gives them a chance to take you down. So displacer beasts are another deep roads beastie that can and does exist. Okay, and hey, Trin, maybe you have to hunt one down and make a cloak out of him if you live, because they're not all that easy to kill. But if you do, you know, maybe you can get yourself a displacer cloak. It was a not entirely rare, or not entirely common either, but it was a thing in the old empire. All right, displacer beasts were kept as pets. All right, if you ever seen in Egypt pictures, probably because it's ancient Egypt, where people have cheetahs as pets, that is the same setup as Doc Elfar and displacer beasts. You know, is not an uncommon thing. In fact, Salvatore, when he designed his famous drow with the panther pet that was based on a, the more common dark elf having a displacer beast. But I guess he decided not to do the tentacles. But that's where that came from. Okay, if you can, if that makes sense, and if any of you are familiar with that character. Okay. See, there's some. Well, there are the list of Deep Roads beasties is longer than my arm, but just to throw some things out there, is that you can use that as a template. Okay, just like undead's a template, and draconic can be used as a template, and demonic, devilish, celestial, elemental, deep roads can all can also be used for, as a template in the same fashion because there are so many beasties down there. Scaled wolf, one of my favorite ones because I happen to like wolves, is a is another deep roads beastie, and it is a wolf in every way, shape, and form, except it's covered in scales and uh, sees in the UV light form. You sees using UV light like a troll or a dark elf. Okay, and when you're thinking Deep Roads template, it doesn't necessarily mean mushrooms. Now, do they have myconid? Yes, there are myconid. Not uncommonly. Does anyone know what a myconid is, or anyone not know what a myconid is? Myconid. Doom 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 doom. Yes, they are. They're mushroom people. That's right. And so of course they have mushroom animals. So just so when you're when you're thinking the deep roads, think deep and broad. You know, it's there's much more to it than just than immediately what comes to mind. There are a vast array of lizards. There's a vast array of mushrooms, and yes, it is not at all uncommon to be growing bugs for food. All right, because they're like lobsters. You all know that lobsters and shrimp are insects, right? You know that, right? Lobsters and shrimp are insects, and crabs are spiders. Okay? So, the fact that dark elves eat a lot of bugs, it sounds creepy, but it just means that they have an appetite for shrimp and lobster, right? It's just that's all, and they're giant, giant bugs. Not like the little. They eat the whole shell or anything. They crack them open, and you treat them just like you do lobster and shrimp. You rip off the shells, rip off the tail, rip off the head, dip them in a little bit of sauce, and ba-bam. Cave fishers are another good example. Okay, they are commonly hunted down. You know, yes, that's right. The crab is a spider. Horseshoe crab is a good example. So in in real life, in real life, yes. If you didn't know that, shrimps and lobster are bugs. They are insects. Yes, you know they taste good. Why not eat them? Okay, it's not like you're eating the whole thing. You're ripping them apart, tearing off their tails, tearing off their heads, and dipping. Okay, so there are whole farms in the old kingdom that are that they raise bugs, but not little ones. You know, they raise big old bugs that they can make food out of. Okay, uh, Skyrim again. For those of you who play Skyrim, you've seen those giant crickets that jump around. Oh, what are they called? Um, ESO. I can't think. But anyway, good example. Those are bugs that are raised as food. And of course, because there's huge underground oceans, there's a lot of fishing too. There's a lot of fishing that can be done. So there's a lot down there, you know. People just people think of when they think under the earth, they think of rocks and and more rocks and maybe some caves, more rocks. Well, there's a lot more to it. Okay, I mean, okay, real life example. Missouri is all the entire state of Missouri is on a cave. The whole state is on a cave. Okay, whoever had to go, I'll be closing this soon. My apologies. I know I'm taking you forever. Beldas, I know she can't hear me. I know she can't hear me. Okay. All right. So, last thing I'm going to say the entire state of Missouri is on top of a cave. So, it's a cave the size of a state. Okay. An entire state. So, could you fit a season there? More than one? Oh, yeah, you could, you know? And that's across the board. You start thinking in bigger terms, you know, when you're thinking of, when you start thinking of the caves that are underneath that form the old kingdom. Okay, yes, lots of them are broken, and you go, and the reason we call it the deep roads is because the dwarves started uh, trying to put the stuff back together as well as they could. The deep dwarfs, but it's still huge and monstrous. Okay, and there's every type of animal down there. Okay, um, from wolves to rabbits. You know, from Kaldaka to Cantor. Kaldaka are scaled wolves. Cantor are um, cobra rhino rabbits. But you get the point. Okay. All right, I'm about to close this, but um, I'm gonna field another round of questions if there are any before I do. Okay. All right, no questions. All right. Okay. I hope everyone got a little bit of knowledge today. Helped them with their hexes and with templates and maybe a little bit more knowledge about some of the deep roads beasties. And I'll definitely have to poke and prod XG9 to make an appearance again. Bell Douse for your attendance. Been doused for now.